Mother-in-law secretly replaced birth control pills with vitamins for months to force pregnancies. I discovered bottles hidden in closet. When Jake and I got married, I thought I was gaining a loving mother-in-law in Patricia. She was warm, welcoming, and seemed genuinely excited to have me as part of the family. She'd invite me over for coffee, ask about my work, and always made sure I felt included in family gatherings. Jake and I had been very clear from the beginning that we wanted to wait at least 5 years before having children. We were both focused on our careers, paying off student loans, and saving for a house. Patricia seemed understanding when we explained our timeline, nodding sympathetically and saying how smart we were to plan ahead. "There's no rush," she'd say with a smile. "When the time is right, you'll know." I'd been on the same birth control pill for years without any issues. My cycle was regular, I never missed doses, and my doctor had assured me it was one of the most reliable forms of contraception available. So when I started feeling nauseous and exhausted about 8 months into our marriage, pregnancy was the last thing on my mind. "You're probably just stressed from the new job," Jake said when I mentioned feeling off. I'd recently started working at a demanding marketing firm, and the long hours were definitely taking their toll. But when I missed my period, I decided to take a pregnancy test just to be safe. The positive result felt like a punch to the gut. I stared at those 2 pink lines for a full 5 minutes, trying to process what this meant for our carefully planned timeline. Jake was shocked but supportive when I told him. "These things happen," he said, holding me while I cried. "Birth control isn't 100% effective. We'll figure it out." His reaction was exactly what I needed to hear, but something nagged at me. I'd been so careful with my pills, taking them at the same time every day, never missing a dose. How could this have happened? My doctor confirmed the pregnancy and explained that while birth control was highly effective, there were factors that could reduce its efficacy. Certain medications, illness, even stress could impact how well the pills worked. I left his office feeling slightly better, chalking it up to bad luck and the stress of adjusting to married life and a new job. Patricia's reaction when we told her was pure joy. She actually squealed and clapped her hands together like a child on Christmas morning. "Oh, I'm so excited," she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug. "I've been praying for this day. A grandchild." "We weren't exactly planning for this to happen so soon," I said carefully, watching her expression. "Well, sometimes God has other plans," she replied with a knowing smile. "Babies are always a blessing, no matter when they arrive." Over the following weeks, Patricia became incredibly involved in my pregnancy. She'd call daily to check on me, bring over prenatal vitamins and books about pregnancy, and constantly offered to help with doctor's appointments or shopping for baby items. "You don't need to do all this," I told her one afternoon when she showed up with yet another bag of pregnancy-related items. "We're still adjusting to the news ourselves." "Nonsense," she waved off my concerns. "I'm just excited to be a grandmother. Let me spoil you a little." Her enthusiasm was overwhelming but seemed genuine. Jake was thrilled that his mother was so supportive, and I tried to appreciate her involvement even though it felt like too much sometimes. About 3 months into the pregnancy, I started experiencing severe morning sickness that lasted all day. My doctor prescribed medication to help, but I was still struggling to keep food down and maintain my energy levels for work. "Why don't you stay with us for a few days?" Patricia suggested when she saw how rough I looked. "I can take care of you while Jake's at work. Make sure you're eating properly and resting." Jake thought it was a wonderful idea. "Mom took great care of me when I was sick as a kid. She'll have you feeling better in no time." I was hesitant about staying at my in-laws' house, but I was feeling so awful that any help seemed appealing. I packed a bag and moved into their guest room for what was supposed to be a long weekend. Patricia was attentive to the point of being suffocating. She'd bring me meals in bed, constantly checking my temperature, and insisting I rest instead of doing anything remotely strenuous. She even offered to manage my medications for me. "I'll set up a pill organizer," she said, holding out her hand for my prescription bottles. "That way you don't have to worry about remembering what to take when." I hesitated for a moment, then handed over my prenatal vitamins and morning sickness medication. "I keep my birth control in my purse," I said automatically, even though I obviously didn't need to be taking it while pregnant. "Oh, you can stop taking that now," Patricia said with a light laugh. "No point in taking birth control when you're already pregnant." She was right, of course. I'd actually forgotten to stop taking the pills in all the chaos of discovering the pregnancy. My doctor had mentioned I should discontinue them, but with everything else going on, it had slipped my mind. "Actually, could you dispose of them for me?" I asked, pulling the pill pack from my purse. "I keep forgetting to throw them away." Patricia took the pills with a strange expression I couldn't quite read. "Of course, dear. I'll take care of it." After 3 days at Patricia's house, I did feel better. The morning sickness was still there, but having someone cook for me and handle the household chores definitely helped my energy levels. Jake was so grateful to his mother for taking care of me that he suggested I stay longer. "Maybe just until the morning sickness passes," he asked hopefully. "Mom doesn't mind, and you're getting better rest here than at our apartment." I agreed to stay another week, though I was starting to feel claustrophobic with Patricia's constant hovering. She meant well, but I wasn't used to having someone monitor my every move. During that extended stay, I noticed Patricia going through my things more than seemed normal. She'd reorganize my clothes, sort through my toiletries, and always had explanations ready when I asked about it. "I was just making sure you had everything you needed," she'd say. "I want you to be completely comfortable here." One morning, I caught her going through my purse while I was in the shower. When I asked what she was looking for, she claimed she was trying to find my insurance card because she thought we might need it for a doctor's appointment. "I have it memorized," I told her, feeling uncomfortable about her going through my personal items. "Oh, good," she replied, but I noticed she seemed flustered at being caught. After that incident, I made sure to keep my purse with me at all times. Something about her behavior was starting to feel invasive rather than helpful. The morning sickness eventually subsided, and I moved back to our apartment. Patricia seemed disappointed that I was leaving, insisting I call her daily and visit at least twice a week. "I just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself," she said as Jake loaded my bags into the car. Pregnancy is such a delicate time. Life returned to a more normal routine, though Patricia continued her frequent check-ins. She'd call during my lunch breaks to ask about my symptoms, what I'd eaten, and whether I was taking my prenatal vitamins regularly. "You are taking them every day, right?" she'd ask. "It's so important for the baby's development." "Yes, Patricia, every morning with breakfast, just like the doctor recommended." About 6 months into the pregnancy, Jake and I started talking seriously about our future plans. We'd need a bigger place before the baby arrived, and we wanted to discuss our childcare options since we both planned to return to work. "I think Patricia expects to be very involved," Jake mentioned one evening as we looked at apartment listings online. "She's been dropping hints about babysitting and maybe even moving closer to us." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "How involved are we talking?" "I don't know exactly, but she's mentioned wanting to help with night feedings and maybe watching the baby while we're at work. She raised me as a single mom after my dad died, so she has experience." The thought of Patricia being our primary childcare provider made me deeply uncomfortable, but I couldn't articulate why. She'd been nothing but supportive throughout my pregnancy, yet something about her intensity around the baby felt off. "Maybe we should look into daycare options too," I suggested carefully, "just to have a backup plan." Jake looked surprised. "Why would we need daycare when mom is willing to help for free? She's family." I didn't know how to explain my reservations without sounding ungrateful or paranoid. Patricia had been wonderful to me, at least on the surface. My concerns felt petty and selfish. As my due date approached, Patricia's involvement increased even more. She wanted to be at every doctor's appointment, help set up the nursery, and be on call for when I went into labor. "I'll be your birth coach," she announced during one visit. "Jake will be too emotional to be much help." "Actually, we've already discussed that Jake will be my primary support person," I said firmly. "We might want to keep it just the two of us for the actual delivery." Patricia's face fell. "But I was there when Jake was born. It's a family tradition." Jake looked torn between supporting me and disappointing his mother. "Maybe mom could be in the waiting room," he suggested. "That way she's close by if we need anything." I agreed to that compromise, though I really wanted to tell Patricia she could wait at home like most grandparents to be. 2 weeks before my due date, I went into labor in the middle of the night. Jake called Patricia while I was in the shower, and by the time we got to the hospital, she was already in the parking lot waiting for us. "I brought snacks and magazines," she said, falling into step beside my wheelchair. Labor can take a long time. She somehow managed to convince the nurses to let her into the delivery room despite my earlier requests for privacy. I was too focused on contractions to argue, and Jake seemed to think having his mother there was natural. When our daughter Emma was born, Patricia's reaction was so emotional that the nurses actually had to ask her to step back. She was crying and reaching for the baby before the umbilical cord was even cut. "My granddaughter," she kept repeating through tears. "My beautiful granddaughter." Even Jake seemed taken aback by his mother's intensity. "Mom, maybe let them clean her up first," he said gently. After Emma was born, Patricia appointed herself as our live-in helper for the first week. She slept on our couch and took over most of the baby care, insisting that I needed to rest and recover. "New mothers shouldn't overexert themselves," she'd say whenever I tried to feed or change Emma myself. "Let grandma handle this." I was grateful for the help initially, but Patricia's behavior became increasingly possessive. She'd wake up for night feedings before I even heard Emma crying, and she seemed reluctant to hand the baby over when I asked. "Are you sure you're ready?" she'd ask. "You still look tired. Why don't you sleep a little longer?" Jake thought his mother was being wonderfully helpful, but I felt like I was missing out on bonding with my own daughter. Emma seemed more settled with Patricia than with me, which broke my heart. After Patricia finally went home, I struggled with breastfeeding and felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of caring for Emma alone during the day while Jake was at work. Every time I called for advice or help, Patricia would rush over and essentially take over. "You're trying too hard," she'd say, taking Emma from my arms. Sometimes babies just need their grandmother. The comment stung, but I was too exhausted to argue. I was also dealing with what I now recognize as postpartum depression, though I didn't identify it at the time. I felt disconnected from Emma and guilty about my lack of maternal instincts. "Maybe I'm just not good at this," I confided to Jake one night after a particularly difficult day. "Your mom seems so natural with Emma. Maybe she should watch her while I go back to work." Jake agreed, thinking it would be perfect for everyone involved. Patricia was thrilled to become Emma's primary caregiver, and I returned to work when Emma was 3 months old, feeling like a failure as a mother. The arrangement seemed to work well initially. Patricia would arrive at our apartment early each morning and stay until Jake got home from work. Emma was always clean, fed, and happy when I returned from the office. But I started noticing things that bothered me. Emma would cry when I tried to hold her, but settle immediately in Patricia's arms. She seemed to prefer Patricia's voice and touch over mine. When I mentioned this to Jake, he brushed off my concerns. "Babies can sense stress," he said. "You're probably just tired from work. Mom has more experience with infants." I began paying closer attention to Patricia's interactions with Emma and noticed she had specific ways of doing everything: feeding, sleeping, playing, that she insisted were the right ways. Whenever I tried to do things differently, she'd correct me. "That's not how Emma likes her bottle held," she'd say, repositioning my hands. "She prefers it this way. Emma sleeps better when she's swaddled tighter than that. You're bouncing her too fast. She likes a gentler rhythm." Every correction felt like criticism of my mothering abilities. I started to dread the evenings when Patricia would update me on Emma's day because it always included subtle suggestions about how I could do things better. 6 months after Emma was born, Jake and I started discussing having another baby. I was surprised by how quickly he brought it up since we'd originally planned to wait several years between children. Mom thinks it would be good for Emma to have a sibling close in age, he said one evening, and since Mom is already helping with childcare, it wouldn't be that much more work. I wasn't ready for another pregnancy. I was still struggling to bond with Emma and felt overwhelmed by the demands of work and motherhood. But Jake seemed excited about the possibility, and Patricia was enthusiastically supportive. Siblings are so important, Patricia said during one of our dinners. Jake was an only child, and I always regretted not giving him brothers or sisters. Emma needs a playmate. I decided to wait a few more months before making any decisions about expanding our family. I wanted to feel more confident as Emma's mother before adding another baby to the mix. But just 2 months later, I found myself staring at another positive pregnancy test. I couldn't believe it was happening again so soon. This time I was more careful about tracking my birth control pills. I kept them in a weekly pill organizer and checked off each day to make sure I wasn't missing doses. Yet somehow I'd gotten pregnant again despite being meticulous about contraception. Maybe we should consider that this is meant to be, Jake said when I expressed my confusion about the timing. 2 babies close together will be challenging, but Mom can help with both of them. Patricia was overjoyed about the second pregnancy, even more so than she'd been about Emma. She immediately started planning how she'd manage caring for 2 small children and began shopping for double everything: strollers, cribs, car seats. I'll have my hands full, she said with obvious delight, but I wouldn't have it any other way. During the second pregnancy, I paid more attention to Patricia's behavior and started noticing things that had escaped me the first time around. She seemed to know about my pregnancy symptoms before I told her about them. She'd bring over specific foods that helped with nausea or supplements for fatigue without me mentioning that I needed them. How did you know I was having trouble sleeping? I asked one day when she showed up with special pregnancy pillows. Mother's intuition, she replied with a knowing smile. I remember what it was like being pregnant. She also seemed unusually interested in my medication routine, always asking if I was taking my prenatal vitamins and whether I needed refills on any prescriptions. I just want to make sure you're getting everything you need, she'd say when I mentioned her frequent questions about my pills. About 4 months into the pregnancy, I had a routine appointment with my obstetrician. During the visit, she asked about my contraception history and seemed surprised when I told her I'd gotten pregnant twice while on birth control. That's unusual, she said, reviewing my chart. The same pill both times? Yes, I've been on the same brand for years. I've always been careful about taking it consistently. Some women do have reduced effectiveness with certain formulations, but 2 unplanned pregnancies on the same pill is worth investigating. Have you had any other medications or supplements that might have interfered? I thought about all the vitamins and supplements Patricia had given me during both pregnancies. My mother-in-law has been very helpful with vitamins and things. Could those interfere? Potentially. Some supplements can affect hormone absorption. Do you remember what specific things you were taking? I realized I'd never really paid attention to the exact supplements Patricia had been giving me. She'd just hand me pills and say they were good for pregnancy or would help with specific symptoms. I'm not sure exactly, I admitted. She's been managing most of my vitamins and supplements. My doctor looked concerned. I'd recommend keeping track of everything you're taking from now on. And if you're serious about not having more children after this pregnancy, we should discuss more reliable contraception options. That conversation planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Why had my birth control failed twice when I'd been so careful? And why was Patricia so invested in managing my supplements and medications? Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention to what Patricia was giving me. She'd arrive each morning with a small container of pills, always explaining what each one was for. But I noticed she seemed evasive when I asked for the original bottles. I organize everything at home, she'd say. It's easier than carrying multiple bottles around. Could I see the bottles sometime? My doctor wants a list of everything I'm taking. Patricia's expression tightened slightly. Of course, I'll bring them next time. But she never did bring the original bottles. There was always an excuse: she'd forgotten them at home, or she'd already thrown them away after organizing the pills, or she'd left them in her other purse. One morning, while Patricia was in the bathroom, I searched through her purse looking for my vitamin bottles. I didn't find vitamins, but I did find something else that made my blood run cold. Hidden in a zippered compartment were 2 empty pill packs with my name on them. But these weren't birth control pills, they were basic multivitamins that had been repackaged in birth control containers. My hands shook as I examined the packaging. Someone had carefully removed the original labels from vitamin bottles and replaced them with prescription labels that looked exactly like my birth control pills. The pharmacy information, prescription number, and doctor's name were all correct, but the contents were wrong. I heard the bathroom door open and quickly shoved the empty packs back into Patricia's purse, my heart pounding. She returned to the kitchen, acting completely normal, chatting about her plans for Emma's day while I sat there trying to process what I'd discovered. "Are you feeling all right, dear?" she asked, noticing my pale complexion. "You look a bit peaked." "I'm fine," I managed to say, "just tired." That evening, after Patricia left and Jake was putting Emma to bed, I went to our medicine cabinet and examined my current birth control pills more carefully. The pills themselves looked identical to what I'd always taken, but when I compared them to photos I found online, I realized they were actually just multivitamins. Someone had been systematically replacing my birth control pills with look-alike vitamins, ensuring that I would get pregnant without realizing why my contraception was failing. And the only person with access to my medications was Patricia. I felt sick as the full scope of what had been happening became clear. Patricia hadn't just been enthusiastically supportive of my pregnancies, she'd been actively causing them. She'd been sabotaging my birth control for months, maybe even years, to force me to have the grandchildren she wanted. But I needed proof before I could confront anyone. Over the next few days, I started documenting everything. I took photos of the vitamin pills that were supposed to be birth control. I searched Patricia's purse again and found more empty vitamin bottles that had been relabeled. Most damning of all, I found a key to our apartment in Patricia's purse. Jake and I had never given her a key, which meant she'd either had one made without our knowledge or had convinced Jake to give her one without telling me. I also started researching online and found stories from other women who'd experienced similar situations. Mothers-in-law tampering with birth control to force pregnancies was apparently more common than I'd ever imagined. There were entire support groups for women who'd been victims of reproductive coercion by family members. The more I read, the angrier I became. This wasn't just about wanting grandchildren, this was about controlling my body and my choices. Patricia had violated my autonomy in the most fundamental way possible. I knew I needed to tell Jake, but I was terrified of his reaction. He adored his mother and trusted her completely. Would he believe me? Or would he think I was having some kind of postpartum breakdown? I decided to gather more evidence before having that conversation. I set up a hidden camera in our kitchen to see what Patricia did when she thought no one was watching. The footage I captured over the next week was devastating. Patricia had a key to our apartment and was letting herself in early each morning before Jake and I woke up. She'd go straight to our medicine cabinet, remove my birth control pills, and replace them with vitamins from bottles she carried in her purse. She'd also been going through our mail, our personal documents, and even our bedroom. The violation felt overwhelming. This woman had been systematically invading our privacy and sabotaging my reproductive choices for months. But the most disturbing footage showed Patricia talking to Emma while she thought no one could hear. "Mommy doesn't really want you," she whispered to my 6-month-old daughter. "But Grandma does. Grandma will always take care of you. Mommy is too busy with work to love you properly, but Grandma loves you more than anyone else in the world. Soon you'll have a little brother or sister, and Mommy won't have time for you at all. But Grandma will always have time." She was poisoning my relationship with my own daughter, just as she'd been poisoning my body with fake medications. I couldn't wait any longer to confront this situation. That evening, after Patricia left, I showed Jake the evidence. The photos, the videos, the empty pill packages, everything. His reaction was exactly what I'd feared. Denial, disbelief, and anger at me for spying on his mother. "This is insane," Bastum, he said, pacing around our living room. "You're accusing my mother of deliberately sabotaging your birth control? Do you hear how crazy that sounds?" They're vitamins. Maybe there was a mistake at the pharmacy. Maybe you picked up the wrong prescription. Multiple times? And explain the key to our apartment. Explain why she's been letting herself in every morning to go through our medicine cabinet. Jake stared at the video footage, his face cycling through confusion, denial, and finally a terrible understanding. "She wouldn't do this," he said weakly. "She loves us. She loves Emma. She loves Emma, yes, but she doesn't love me. She sees me as an incubator for her grandchildren." The next morning, I confronted Patricia directly. I waited until she let herself into our apartment with her unauthorized key, then emerged from the bedroom where I'd been waiting. "Good morning, Patricia," I said calmly. "We need to talk." She looked startled, but quickly recovered her composure. "Oh, you're up early. I was just going to start some coffee before Emma wakes up." "No," I said firmly. "You were going to go through our medicine cabinet like you do every morning." Her face went pale, but she maintained her innocent expression. "I don't know what you mean." I pulled out my phone and showed her the video footage of her switching my pills. "I know exactly what you've been doing." For a moment, Patricia's mask slipped completely. I saw a flash of pure rage in her eyes before she regained control. "You don't understand," she said, dropping her voice to a whisper. "Jake needs children. Our family needs to continue. That's not your decision to make. You are being selfish," she hissed. "Waiting years and years, focused on your career instead of giving my son the family he deserves." Jake agreed to wait. We both wanted to establish ourselves before having children. Jake is too considerate to tell you what he really wants, but I could see how much he wanted to be a father. I felt like I was seeing the real Patricia for the first time. This wasn't a loving grandmother. This was a controlling manipulator who'd been sabotaging my life for her own agenda. "You violated my body," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You took away my choice." "I gave you beautiful children," she replied, as if that justified everything. "Emma and this new baby are blessings. They're blessings I should have chosen to have, not been tricked into having." Jake appeared in the doorway, having heard our raised voices. He looked devastated as he listened to his mother's justifications. "Mom," he said quietly, "please tell me this isn't true." Patricia turned to her son with tears in her eyes. "I only wanted what was best for our family. You wanted children, Jake. You've always wanted children. But not like this," he said, his voice breaking. "Not by lying and manipulating Rebecca." "She would have kept making excuses to wait," Patricia said desperately. "Career, money, timing, there's always something. Sometimes you have to make the hard choices for people who can't make them themselves." Jake sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "I can't believe you did this." "Everything I did was out of love," Patricia insisted. "Love for you, love for Emma, love for this family." "No," I said firmly. "Love doesn't involve deception and control. What you did was abuse." Patricia's expression hardened again. "You're being dramatic. You got 2 beautiful children out of this. You should be grateful." That's when I knew there was no reasoning with her. In her mind, the ends justified the means, and she would never accept that what she'd done was wrong. Jake asked his mother to leave and told her not to return until we figured out how to move forward. She left reluctantly, but not before making one final attempt to manipulate the situation. "You'll change your mind," she told Jake. "When you realize how good things have been with my help, you'll forgive me." After she left, Jake and I had the most difficult conversation of our marriage. He was devastated by his mother's betrayal and furious that I'd been violated in such a fundamental way, but he was also struggling with the knowledge knowledge that our pregnancies had been orchestrated without our consent. "I love Emma," he said through tears, "and I'll love this new baby, but knowing how they came to be, it changes everything." I felt the same way. I loved my daughter and was already bonding with the baby I was carrying, but the knowledge that their conceptions had been forced made everything more complicated. We decided to change the locks immediately and cut off Patricia's access to our home. We also discussed whether to press charges for what she'd done, though our lawyer explained that proving reproductive coercion would be challenging. What she did was definitely illegal, he told us, but getting a conviction would require proving intent, and she could claim she was just trying to help with your vitamins. In the end, we decided to focus on protecting ourselves and our children rather than pursuing criminal charges. We got a restraining order to keep Patricia away from our home and established supervised visitation with Emma only in public places. The pregnancy continued, and our son David was born healthy and beautiful, but the circumstances of his conception cast a shadow over what should have been a joyful time. Patricia fought the restraining order and tried to maintain her relationship with Emma through Jake. She insisted she'd done nothing wrong and that we were overreacting to what she called a misunderstanding. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she told Jake during one of their supervised phone calls. "I just wanted our family to be complete." But Jake was done making excuses for his mother's behavior. "What you did was unforgivable," he told her. "You violated Rebecca's trust and autonomy. You lied to both of us for months." "I gave you children," Patricia replied. "Isn't that worth something?" "Not when it was done through deception and manipulation." Our marriage survived the revelation, but it took months of counseling to work through the trauma and betrayal. Jake struggled with guilt over his mother's actions and anger at himself for not noticing what was happening. "I should have protected you," he said during one of our therapy sessions. "I should have seen that her behavior was inappropriate." I didn't blame Jake for his mother's choices, but I did resent how easily he dismissed my concerns about Patricia's invasiveness. In retrospect, there had been warning signs that we'd both ignored. 3 years later, we're in a much better place. Emma and David are thriving, and Jake and I have rebuilt our trust and communication. We've been vigilant about contraception since David's birth, using multiple methods to ensure we don't have any more unplanned pregnancies. Patricia has had no contact with our children since the restraining order was issued. She's made several attempts to reconcile, including sending letters and gifts that we've returned unopened. She even showed up at Emma's daycare once, claiming she was authorized to pick her up. The daycare called us immediately, and we had to involve the police. Patricia was arrested for violating the restraining order and spent a night in jail. That seemed to finally convince her that we were serious about maintaining boundaries. Jake occasionally gets updates about his mother through extended family members. She's told everyone who will listen that I'm a vindictive daughter-in-law who's keeping her from her grandchildren. She's never admitted to wrongdoing or shown any understanding of why her actions were harmful. She still thinks she was helping, Jake said after his cousin called to relay Patricia's latest attempts to gain sympathy. She genuinely believes she did the right thing. That's perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the whole situation. Patricia wasn't motivated by malice or hatred. She genuinely thought she was acting in our best interests. In her mind, she was facilitating the family she believed we should want. But intent doesn't excuse impact. What she did was a profound violation of my bodily autonomy and reproductive rights. She stole my ability to choose when and how to expand our family, and she damaged my trust in relationships and institutions that should have been safe. The experience taught me to trust my instincts about people and situations, even when my concerns seem minor or petty. Patricia's invasive behavior had made me uncomfortable from early in our relationship, but I dismissed those feelings as ungrateful or oversensitive. I've also learned the importance of maintaining independence within marriage and family relationships. Allowing Patricia to manage my medications and supplements was a boundary violation that enabled her larger scheme. No one else should have that level of control over another person's body or medical care. Looking back, I can see how Patricia systematically isolated me from my own maternal instincts and bonding with Emma. By positioning herself as the expert caregiver and constantly correcting my parenting choices, she undermined my confidence and created dependency on her involvement. That pattern might have continued indefinitely if I hadn't discovered the pill switching. I might have continued to feel inadequate as a mother while Patricia maintained her central role in our family. Now, Emma calls me mommy with genuine affection, and David lights up when he sees me come home from work. I've reclaimed my role as their primary parent, and our bond is strong and authentic. Jake and I have talked about whether to tell the children about Patricia's actions when they're older. It's a difficult decision because we don't want to burden them with knowledge that might make them question their own worth or existence. They need to know they're loved and wanted, Jake said during a recent conversation about this topic. How they came to be conceived doesn't change that. I agree, but I also think they deserve to understand the importance of consent and bodily autonomy as they grow up. Patricia's actions are an extreme example of how family members can overstep boundaries in the name of love. For now, we're focused on raising our children with strong values around respect, honesty, and personal choice. We want them to understand that love doesn't justify controlling or manipulating others, even with good intentions. The whole experience changed my relationship with the concept of family. I'd always believed that family members inherently had each other's best interests at heart, but Patricia's actions showed me that family relationships can be just as toxic and harmful as any other relationship. Blood relation or marriage doesn't give someone the right to make decisions about your body or your life. Trust must be earned and maintained through consistent, respectful behavior, not assumed based on familial connections. I've also become more aware of reproductive coercion as a form of abuse. Patricia's pill switching was just one method, but there are many ways that partners and family members can sabotage contraception or force pregnancies. Since sharing my story with friends and online support groups, I've heard from dozens of other women who've experienced similar violations. Mothers-in-law tampering with birth control, partners secretly removing condoms or IUDs, family members pressuring women to get pregnant or continue unwanted pregnancies. These experiences are more common than most people realize, but they're rarely discussed openly because of shame and stigma around reproductive choices. I hope that by sharing my story, other women will recognize the warning signs and trust their instincts when family members or partners seem too invested in their reproductive decisions. No one has the right to make choices about your body or your family planning, regardless of their relationship to you or their stated good intentions. Patricia's pill switching changed the trajectory of my entire life. While I love Emma and David deeply and can't imagine life without them, I'll always grieve the choices that were taken away from me. I should have been able to decide when I was ready to become a mother. I should have been able to plan for pregnancies when Jake and I felt financially and emotionally prepared. I should have been able to trust that my birth control would work as intended. Those choices were stolen from me by someone who claimed to love me and my family. That betrayal cut deeper than any stranger's actions could have, because it came from within the circle of people I should have been able to trust most. But I found healing through setting boundaries, building authentic relationships with my children, and helping other women recognize and escape similar situations. My marriage is stronger now because Jake and I learned to communicate more openly and to question family dynamics that seemed unhealthy. Our children are growing up in a home where their choices and autonomy are respected, even in small matters like what clothes to wear or what activities to pursue. And most importantly, I've reclaimed control over my own body and reproductive decisions. We've since had the family planning conversations that Patricia stole from us initially, and we've made informed choices about contraception and future pregnancies based on our own desires and circumstances. The scars from Patricia's manipulation will probably never fully heal, but they've taught me valuable lessons about trust, boundaries, and the importance of listening to my own instincts. Sometimes the people who claim to love us most are the ones capable of the deepest betrayals. But recognizing that reality doesn't make us cynical or paranoid, it makes us wiser and better able to protect ourselves and our families. Looking at Emma and David now, playing together in our living room while Jake reads them a bedtime story, I'm grateful for the family we've built despite the circumstances of how it began. Patricia may have forced the timing of their conception, but she couldn't control the love, security, and respect they experience in our home every day. That's something she'll never be able to take away from us, no matter how many boundaries she violated or how many choices she stole. The children she manipulated us into having are being raised with the values she tried to undermine: honesty, consent, and the fundamental right to make decisions about your own body and life. In the end, that might be the best revenge against someone who thought she could control our family's destiny through deception and manipulation. She wanted grandchildren, but she'll never know the remarkable people Emma and David are becoming because her actions cost her the relationship she claimed to value most. And Jake and I learned that our marriage was strong enough to survive even the most devastating betrayal, as long as we faced it together with honesty and mutual respect. Patricia's pill switching taught us that family isn't just about blood or marriage, it's about trust, respect, and genuinely wanting what's best for each other. By those standards, she was never really family at all. But Emma, David, Jake, and I were family in every way that matters, and no one will ever be able to manipulate or control us again.